The call came on a Friday morning, interrupting my usual routine of coffee and emails. When I saw Betty's name flash across my screen, I knew it wasn't going to be pleasant. It never was with her. Taking a deep breath, I answered, keeping my tone neutral. "Hello, Betty. I've sold the house," she announced without preamble, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "The papers are signed. The new owners move in next week. I hope you've learned your lesson about respecting your elders." My grip on the coffee mug tightened. The house Betty was so smugly referring to wasn't just any house, it was my childhood home. The one my father had left me when he passed away 3 years ago. Or at least, that's what Betty thought. "The house," I repeated, fighting to keep my amusement in check. "You mean Dad's house?" "Don't play dumb, Barbara. You know exactly which house I'm talking about. The one you've been squatting in rent-free since your father died. Well, that ends now. I've found buyers who will actually appreciate the property." I took a slow sip of my coffee, my mind flashing back to the meeting I'd had with Dad's lawyer, Mr. Hutton, just days after the funeral. A meeting Betty knew nothing about. A meeting where real ownership of the house had been settled. "That's interesting," I said, carefully masking my thoughts. "And you're sure everything is legal?" She scoffed. "Of course it's legal. I was his wife, Barbara. The house was in his name. You might have been his precious little daughter, but I have rights too. Maybe next time, you'll think twice before questioning my decisions about the remodeling." Ah, there it was. The real reason behind this power play. For months ago, I had stopped Betty from gutting the house's historic features, the hand-carved banisters, the original hardwood floors, the stained-glass windows my father had spent years restoring. She had wanted to erase every trace of him, to modernize and reshape the home into something unrecognizable. I had stood in her way. "I see," I murmured. "Well, I hope you got a good price for it." "Don't worry about the price," she snapped. "Just make sure you're out by next Saturday. The new owners are eager to start their renovations." I leaned back in my chair, smiling to myself. Betty had no idea. This was going to be interesting. I could almost picture Betty's smug expression, imagining me scrambling to pack my things and leave. If only she knew. "Thanks for letting me know," I replied smoothly. "Goodbye, Betty." I hung up, a slow smile creeping onto my face. Betty had always underestimated me, just as she had underestimated my father's foresight. She thought she knew everything about our family's affairs, but there was so much she never understood. Without hesitation, I picked up my phone and dialed Mr. Hutton's number. "Barbara," he answered warmly, as if he had been expecting my call. "She did it," I said, shaking my head. "She actually tried to sell the house." "Did she now?" There was amusement in his voice. "Well, this should be interesting. Would you like me to set things in motion?" "Yes, please. And Mr. Hutton, make sure the buyers understand exactly what's happening. I don't want innocent people getting tangled in Betty's mess." "Of course," he assured me. "Consider it handled." As I hung up, I exhaled slowly and looked around my house. My house. I walked through each familiar room, my fingers trailing along the walls my father had carefully painted, the door frames he had restored, the window seats where we had spent countless afternoons reading together. Every inch of this place was steeped in memories, stories, laughter, the life we had built together. Betty never understood that. She had only been in our lives for 6 years, marrying my father when I was 24. At first, she played the role of the perfect stepmother, warm smiles, sugary words, pretending to care. But the act didn't last long. After the wedding, her true colors bled through. She tried to drive a wedge between my father and me, making snide remarks about our close bond, rolling her eyes at our traditions, constantly pushing to change things about our home. She wanted to strip it of its history, turn it into something sleek and modern, something that erased him. Dad saw through her eventually, but by then, his health was failing. He grew weaker, his once bright eyes dimming. Yet even in his final months, he had one last ace up his sleeve. One evening, while Betty was off at her weekly spa appointment, he called me into his study. I still remember the way he looked that night, frail but determined, sitting behind his old oak desk, the scent of his leather-bound books surrounding us. "Kathleen," he said, using the old nickname he had given me when I was a child. And in that moment, I knew whatever he was about to say would change everything. "I need you to trust me, Kathleen," my father had said that night, his voice weak but steady. "Things aren't what they seem with Betty, and I've made arrangements. When the time comes, go see Timothy Hutton. He'll explain everything." I had wanted to ask more questions, to press for details, but Dad had been so tired, his strength fading by the second. So, I had simply nodded, holding his hand, unaware that those would be some of the last words he'd ever say to me. 3 weeks later, he was gone. Betty barely waited until after the funeral to start asserting control. She wasted no time moving my father's belongings into storage, stripping the house of his presence, as if he had never lived there. She redecorated rooms without consulting me, swapping out the warm, lived-in charm for cold, modern sterility. She acted as though the house belonged solely to her, as though I was nothing more than an inconvenient guest overstaying my welcome. What she didn't know was that my father had seen this coming. When I met with Mr. Hutton, I finally understood just how carefully Dad had planned everything. Despite what Betty believed, the house had never been solely in his name. Through a series of legal maneuvers I didn't fully understand, he had safeguarded both the property and me, ensuring that no one, not even his widow, could take it away. The buzzing of my phone pulled me from my thoughts. A text from Betty. "I expect the keys on my desk by Monday. Don't make this difficult, Barbara." I smiled, typing back a simple reply. "Don't worry, Betty. Everything will work out exactly as it should." She didn't respond. She probably thought she'd won. She had no idea the real show was about to begin. And I had front row seats to watch her carefully laid plans fall apart. My father had always told me that patience was a virtue. Sometimes, Kathleen, the best response is to wait and let people reveal their true nature. Well, Betty had certainly revealed hers. Now it was time for her to learn about mine. I spent the rest of the morning in my father's study, sifting through old photos. One picture showed the two of us working on the house together, covered in paint and sawdust, grinning like fools. Another captured us in the garden he had planted, surrounded by the roses he had lovingly tended for years. Betty had wanted to rip out those roses last spring, claiming they were outdated. I had stopped her then, just as I was about to stop her now. She thought she had taken everything from me. She was about to learn just how wrong she was. I was about to stop Betty once again, this time for good. My phone buzzed in my hand, Mr. Hutton's name flashing on the screen. "The wheels are in motion," he said the moment I answered. "The buyer's lawyer has been notified of the situation. They're understandably upset with Betty, but relieved they found out before any money changed hands." I exhaled, feeling the weight of victory settle in. "How long until she finds out?" "I'd say by this afternoon," he replied. "Their lawyer is drafting a strongly worded letter as we speak. Would you like me to be present when she receives it?" I considered it for a moment. Watching Betty's world crumble in real time would be satisfying, no doubt. But this was something she needed to face alone. No, I decided. Let her deal with it herself. She needs to understand exactly what she's done. "As you wish," he said. "But Barbara, be prepared for the fallout. People like Betty don't handle humiliation well." He was right about that. Betty had always been proud, always needed to be in control. Finding out that she had tried to sell a house she had no legal right to, only to embarrass herself in front of serious buyers, it would be a blow to her ego like no other. And that was exactly the point. The explosion. The fallout came faster than expected. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, my phone was flooded with missed calls and increasingly furious texts from Betty. "What have you done?" The last message was in all caps, practically vibrating with rage. I was sitting in the garden among my father's roses when I heard the unmistakable screech of tires. A sleek silver Mercedes tore into the driveway, braking so hard I half expected the tires to leave marks on the pavement. The car door flew open, and out stormed Betty, her usual composed, polished facade cracking at the edges. In her clenched fist, she waved a stack of papers, the letter. "You conniving little witch," she shrieked, her voice raw with fury. I stayed seated, my fingers idly tracing the petals of a rose. Betty, I greeted calmly. She stomped toward me, her designer heels sinking slightly into the grass. You knew about this all along, she accused, her face red, her hair slightly disheveled, so unlike the perfectly curated image she always presented to the world. I tilted my head. Knew about what? Don't play innocent with me, she snapped, thrusting the letter toward me as if I hadn't already known exactly what it said. The trust. The property transfer. All of it. You and Timothy plotted this behind my back. I sighed, standing up slowly. No, Betty, I corrected gently. Dad and Mr. Hutton arranged it. Her mouth opened and closed, her breath coming in sharp, shallow bursts. I could see the realization dawning in her eyes, the truth she had never once considered. This wasn't about me outsmarting her. This wasn't about me plotting anything behind her back. This was about my father. He had seen her for what she was. He had known, even as he lay dying, that she would try to take what wasn't hers. And he had made sure she never could. Betty staggered back a step, gripping the letter so tightly her knuckles turned white. For the first time since I had known her, she had nothing to say. No sharp remark, no manipulative plea, no scheme to turn the situation in her favor. She had lost, and she knew it. I took a slow, deep breath, inhaling the scent of my father's roses. For the first time in a long time, everything felt exactly as it should. I simply followed my father's instructions. Betty's face twisted with rage. Your father would never do this to me. This has to be a mistake. I stood up slowly, brushing dirt from my jeans. Actually, Dad did exactly this, to protect me and the house. He saw right through you, Betty. He knew exactly what you would try to do after he was gone. She took a step back, her designer heels sinking slightly into the soft garden soil. That's impossible, she muttered. He trusted me. He loved me. I tilted my head. Did he? I asked quietly. Or did he just let you think he did? The color drained from her face. For the first time, she realized the truth. My father, the man she had thought she'd completely manipulated, had outmaneuvered her from beyond the grave. The house was never in his name, I continued, watching her process each revelation. He transferred it to a trust years ago, long before he even met you. I'm the sole beneficiary. You had no right to try and sell it. Betty's lips parted, but no words came out. She shook her head, whispering, You're lying. I crossed my arms. Check the property records. They're all public. Dad made sure of that too. He wanted everything to be transparent when the time was right. Her hands trembled as she clenched the lawyer's letter in her fists, her nails digging into the paper. The buyers, they're threatening legal action, she choked out. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is? I raised an eyebrow. Almost as humiliating as trying to throw your stepdaughter out of her own house. I countered. Or maybe as humiliating as spending years pretending to care about someone just to get their money. Betty flinched, as if I had slapped her. You don't understand anything about my relationship with your father, she hissed, her voice cracking. I gave her a long, measured look. I understand more than you think. Her breath hitched. Dad told me everything before he died, I continued, my voice calm but firm. About the prenup you refused to sign. About the mysterious withdrawals from his accounts. About the men you met with while he was in the hospital. Her eyes widened in shock. He knew? I nodded. He knew everything, Betty. He just waited, watched, and planned. I let that sink in. And then I smiled. Like father, like daughter. For the first time since she arrived, Betty had nothing to say. She had lost. And now she knew it. Betty took another step back, her expensive suit now smeared with dirt and garden soil. She glanced down at the mess, her manicured fingers twitching as if she wanted to wipe it away, but she didn't dare. This isn't over, she hissed, but her voice wavered, lacking the confidence she once wielded like a weapon. Actually it is, I replied coolly, pulling out my phone. I've recorded this entire conversation. Would you like me to add it to the file Mr. Hutton is building? The one documenting your attempts to illegally sell property you don't own. For the first time since I had known her, Betty was speechless. She stood frozen, surrounded by my father's roses, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. I took a step forward, lowering my voice but making sure each word hit its mark. I'll make this simple. Leave. Her gaze snapped back to mine. Leave the house. Leave me alone. And most importantly, I said, my voice hardening, leave my father's memory alone. If you try anything else, any more schemes, any more attempts to take what isn't yours, then everything comes out. She swallowed, but I kept going. The affairs, the missing money, all of it. Her eyes darkened, her breath hitching. You wouldn't dare, she hissed. It would damage your precious father's reputation. I smiled, slow and unshaken, feeling the same quiet strength my father had always carried. Dad's reputation can handle the truth, Betty, I said softly. Can yours? She stared at me, her mind racing, calculations flickering in her eyes. Finally, her shoulders slumped just slightly, so slight that someone who didn't know her wouldn't have noticed. But I did. Fine, she spat, pure venom lacing the word. Keep the house. Keep your little victory. She turned sharply, but not before adding, but don't think this means you've won. I tilted my head. I already have, I said simply. I won the moment Dad saw you for who you really are. Her lips pressed into a thin, furious line, but she had nothing left to say. She stormed back to her car, her expensive heels sinking into the damp grass with each angry step. The engine roared to life, and without another glance, she sped away, disappearing down the road. The aftermath. As the dust settled, I noticed a crumpled piece of paper lying in the garden. Betty had dropped the lawyer's letter in her rage. I bent down, smoothing out the creases. The legal jargon was thick, but the meaning was unmistakable. Betty had no claim to the house. She never had. Her attempt to sell, it was fraud. My phone buzzed. A text from Mr. Hutton. How did she take it? I smirked, typing back. About as well as we expected. But I think she's finally done. A moment later, his reply appeared. Your father would be proud. He always said you were stronger than anyone knew. I took a deep breath, looking around at the home my father had protected, not just with legal documents, but with love, foresight, and an unshakable trust in me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt that strength in myself, too. I had won. And now I was finally free. A legacy protected. I stood in the garden, looking around at the roses my father had tended with such care, their petals soft and full of life. The air smelled of earth and blossoms, a scent that reminded me of long afternoons spent with him, learning how to nurture something that could outlast us. And the house, his house, stood strong and steady, just as he had intended. He had known this day would come, had prepared for it in ways I was only now beginning to understand. Betty had thought she was teaching me a lesson about respect. Instead, she had learned a lesson about underestimating people, both the living and the dead. The weeks after Betty's downfall felt lighter. It was as if a shadow had been lifted from the house, the weight of her presence finally gone. I spent my evenings undoing her rushed, tasteless renovations, carefully restoring each room to its original state. The hardwood floors my father had refinished by hand, the hand-carved banisters she had wanted to replace, the stained glass windows she had called outdated, all of it was coming back to life. One evening, while sorting through boxes in my father's study, I found something unexpected. A letter. The envelope was slightly yellowed at the edges, but the handwriting on the front was unmistakable, my father's. It was addressed to me. My breath caught in my throat as I traced my fingers over the familiar script. The date on the envelope was from just days before he passed. With trembling hands, I open it. My dearest Kathleen, if you are reading this, then everything has played out as I expected. Betty has likely tried to take the house by now, and you have learned about the trust arrangements I made with Timothy. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you everything while I was alive. Betty was watching too closely, and I needed her to believe she had won. You see, I discovered her true nature about a year into our marriage. But by then, she had already shown her hand. The mysterious illness that landed me in the hospital? Not so mysterious, after all. I had Timothy investigate. The dizzy spells, the confusion, the gradual weakening. It wasn't natural decline. Betty had been adding something to my evening tea. Not enough to kill me outright, but just enough to make me fade. She wanted it to look like time was taking me. So I played along. I let her believe she was succeeding. And in the meantime, I made arrangements to protect you and everything we built together. Because this house, Kathleen, isn't just a building. It's our legacy. Every repair, every restoration, it's a piece of our story. And I couldn't let it fall into the wrong hands. I know it must have hurt to watch me seem to choose her over you in those last months. I needed her to believe she had complete control, so she wouldn't suspect what was coming. Please forgive me for that deception. But there is more you need to know. Check behind the loose brick in the study fireplace. The next chapter. My heart pounded as I reread his words, my hands gripping the letter tightly. Betty had been poisoning him. She had stolen his final months, made his last days harder than they needed to be. And still, he had outplayed her. I swallowed back the anger rising in my chest. Now wasn't the time for rage. Now was the time for answers. Shoving the letter into my pocket, I turned toward the fireplace, my father's last instructions burning in my mind. I reached out, running my fingers along the bricks, feeling for anything loose. And then there, a slight shift beneath my fingertips. With a deep breath, I pulled the brick free. Inside was something wrapped in cloth. Carefully, I reached in and retrieved it, my heart racing as I unfolded the fabric. And then I saw it. And everything changed. I unfolded the second note with trembling hands. I left something there for you. Remember, strength isn't always about confrontation. Sometimes it's about patience, about waiting for the right moment to act. I love you, my darling girl. Dad. I sat there for a long time, my tears falling onto the paper. It all made sense now. His distant behavior in those final months. The cryptic conversations. The way he had insisted on having tea alone with Betty every evening. He had known. And he had played the long game. Swallowing hard, I moved to the fireplace, feeling along the bricks until I found the loose one. It came free easily, revealing a small, carefully wrapped package inside. A USB drive. And another note. Show this to the police when you're ready. I stared at the drive in my palm, my pulse pounding in my ears. Whatever was on it, my father had risked everything to document it. With shaking fingers, I plugged it into my laptop. And then I saw it. Footage from hidden cameras he had installed. Betty, standing in the kitchen, pouring something into his tea, night after night. Betty, meeting with strange men in hotel lobbies, in parked cars, whispering about when it's done. Betty on the phone, her voice cold and calculating as she discussed her plans for after my father's death. My stomach turned. She had been poisoning him. Slowly, deliberately. She had wanted it to look natural, for him to fade, so she could take everything. But she had underestimated him. He had seen her. He had prepared for her. My hand shaking, I picked up my phone and called Mr. Hutton. He answered on the first ring. Barbara? I found Dad's letter, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. And the drive. Silence. Then, quietly, he asked, Are you ready to take the next step? I stared at the screen, the damning evidence right in front of me. Attempted murder. Fraud. Conspiracy. Betty wouldn't just lose her social standing. She would lose everything. She would go to prison. I exhaled slowly. Not yet, I decided. Let's keep it as insurance for now. Knowing we have it is enough. Mr. Hutton chuckled. Your father said you'd say that, he replied, amusement in his voice. He always said you had his sense of strategy. Betty's surrender. The next morning, a large envelope arrived from Betty's lawyer. Inside was a formal document relinquishing any claims to the house or my father's estate. A single handwritten note was tucked inside. You win, Barbara. I'm leaving the state. Don't worry about hearing from me again. Just keep what you know to yourself. I let out a slow breath. She had found the cameras. Of course she had. She must have searched the house after our confrontation, looking for anything incriminating. And she had found something, but not everything. The threat of the drive's existence had been enough. She knew if I took the next step, her life was over. So she ran. The house stands strong. I stood in my father's study, surrounded by the life we had built together. For the first time since his passing, I felt a deep, unshakable peace. He had protected me one last time, had taught me one final lesson about patience, about knowing when to act and when to simply wait. The house remained as he had wanted it, preserved, cherished, a testament to our bond. Betty had failed. She had tried to steal it. She had tried to come between us. But in the end, she had nothing. Outside, in the garden, my father's roses bloomed more beautifully than ever. And for the first time in a long, long time, I smiled. I took care of the roses with love, making sure each one bloomed as beautifully as my father would have wanted. Every time a new flower opened, it felt like a small way to honor his memory. Sometimes, while tending to them, I could almost hear his voice. Remember, Kathleen, the strongest roots grow in silence. They stay hidden until the right moment to bloom. He was right, of course. Strength isn't always about fighting. Sometimes, it's about waiting, watching, and letting people show their true colors. Betty had taught me about lies and the masks people wear. But Dad had taught me something much more important: how to see through those masks, how to protect what truly matters, and how to win without losing yourself. A house that stands. The house is still here, just as it has always been. It stands as a reminder of love, patience, and quiet justice. Betty is gone, and the chaos she brought with her is just a memory. And somewhere I like to think Dad is smiling, knowing that I learned his final lesson well. A secret left untouched. As for the USB drive, it's still hidden behind the loose brick in the study fireplace. A quiet protector. A secret waiting in the dark. Some truths are meant to stay buried. At least for now. Because, as Dad always said, timing is everything.